Well, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar this afternoon on maximising your Microsoft subscription. Just three of us hosting the call today. So if I don't know you already, my name is Dan May. I'm the Managing Director here at Ramsac. I'm joined by my colleagues Matt Longman, who's our Head of Commercial, and James Neville, who is a Solutions Architect here at Ramsac. The background to this webinar and what it is we're aiming to do today is to talk you through the technology that you're probably already paying for but might not be fully utilising. So for a lot of the organisations that we work with, your Microsoft subscription is a really significant part of your monthly IT bill. And as with all things, as it's always been with Microsoft Tech, really, for most clients that we work with, we find they're sort of scratching the surface of what that licence offers. And there's a huge amount that you can do that you're not currently perhaps doing, but you might be able to do without spending any more money in terms of Microsoft licensing. So the three of us are really going to have a bit of a conversation today. I'm going to start off by just setting a little bit of background, and I'm going to talk very briefly about the sort of, if you like, the front-end Microsoft applications that you get within your 365 subscription. So we're going to talk quickly about some of the stuff that you're probably very familiar with, as well as a few of the front-end applications that you might not know. But then we want to move on and we want to talk about security and control and protecting your data wherever it sits, whatever device your people are working from. And again, just to talk about the technology that's very much part of that Microsoft subscription that enables you to do that, but it doesn't just work, it has to be configured. And very much that's where I'm going to turn to Matt and James, who are far more technical than me, so that we can talk that through in more detail. But first of all, I just want to look at the background. The world has changed. We're 4 years on now from COVID, and really, it advanced our working practices and it advanced digital transformation quicker than anybody ever expected it to be. And the way that we work is entirely different to the way we worked 5 years ago. So more than ever, we see this sort of dichotomy of IT challenge. At one end, we've got end users, and end users these days have a higher than ever expectation of the way that technology should work. We're all just used to picking up a phone, picking up a tablet, logging on to our bank or logging on to a TV streaming service, etc. And it's always there, wherever we happen to be, whether we're at home, whether we're visiting friends, whether we're at work, whether we're at a coffee shop. The things that we rely on in our personal use of IT, they just work. And if you think back 5 or 6 years, IT downtime was sort of tolerated. It was kind of expected that, once every few weeks or few months, a server might go down and you might have staff sat around twiddling thumbs whilst the IT guys scrabble to fix an IT problem. But end user expectation has moved on from that. End user expectation is that IT should just be reliable, but also end user expectation is that IT should be available wherever they are, whether they're at home, work, or in a branch of Starbucks, and whether they're on the laptop that you've issued them with, whether they're using a company mobile phone or a personal tablet. So end user expectation is high. Behind that, as organisation leaders, we're probably a little bit more terrorised than ever before around how we are going about keeping our data safe. And we're all concerned about GDPR compliance. We're all concerned, most weeks at some point there will be a news story about a data breach or, be that accidental or malicious. And that's a real challenge. And there's lots of conflicting needs in the organisation, but also IT is no longer neatly behind a firewall in a server room that we own in our office. Everything is cloud-based, and Microsoft 365 is a really great example of that. All the stuff that used to sit in our comms rooms on servers, in data cabinets that we owned, whether that was our Exchange server or our file server, all of that was kind of protected it felt. And now it's out there. And a lot of the clients that we work with for the first time, actually, they're not really sure where all their data sits. It's kind of in this ethereal cloud, but what does that mean? So let's look at 365. Microsoft are not in the business of making licenses easy to understand, and they never have done. But recent changes to the way that you buy your 365 has actually resulted in really comprehensive bundles that, if configured correctly, allow you to create arguably the most secure, flexible IT estate you're ever likely to need. The trouble is that most people don't understand the power that's now available to them. And as I said, in this presentation, really what we're seeking to do is show you what it is you're paying for and how, if properly configured, we can answer all of the challenges of that previous slide. If you went to the Microsoft website today, this is the information you'd be presented with. Essentially, 3 core business license types: basic, standard, and premium. There's a list of logos, most of which probably look vaguely familiar, but others will probably pass you by. And what we want to do today is look at what some of those logos actually mean. I should say that we're going to focus on the SME business plan today, the Microsoft 365 Business Premium, which is the license that covers organizations of up to 300 users. We've looked at the delegate list for today's call, and it feels that that's an appropriate place for us to focus. However, for everything that we're talking about, there is an equivalent in the enterprise grade licenses. So if you're on the call thinking, well, I've got 400 staff, don't worry, this is all still relevant to you. But the business premium license is the most popular and the best value of all of the Microsoft bundles. It costs £18.10 per user per month, or £4.50 per user per month for charities and not-for-profit organisations. Most people pay that money and then they use Outlook, Word, Excel and PowerPoint. And again, you're just not making the most of your investment. So that's what we're going to go on and talk about today. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about the stuff initially that you probably already know about. So what are you getting within your £18 a month? Most familiar part of Business Premium, those core Office applications: Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and OneNote. And if you've got the Business Premium version, you know that you can install all of those on your laptop, on your home machine if you want to, on your mobile devices as well. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, they're very familiar. They've been around for a really long time. There's some other tools that you may not know. The little purple icon there is OneNote. OneNote is a really powerful shared digital notebook. We've got separate webinars, and we've got some content on our website that talks specifically about OneNote if you've never used that particular tool. And of course, Outlook is the thing that we're all living in all day, every day. It's the tool that most of us use for managing and sharing our inboxes, our calendars, and our contact lists. Most of these icons will probably be familiar to you as well, but not all of them. So the next set of icons we're looking at cover collaboration and file storage and file sharing. So Microsoft Teams is the place that most of your users probably live these days. It's the collaboration tool that most people use for video calling, instant messaging, and creating shared workspaces. It also provides tools to run webinars and online events, such as the one that you've joined today, and so much more. Again, this isn't a Teams webinar, so I'm not going to go into lots of detail about Teams, but there are loads of Teams resources and videos on our website. It's just so big. Safe to say, if all you're using Teams for is video calling, then again, you're really just scratching the surface about what you can do with that. The next logo along is SharePoint. At its simplest level, SharePoint has replaced the file server. It's the tool that most people use to create shared file storage. And certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, those people that still had file servers in their office, there was a lot of slightly rushed lift and shift projects to take data from server-based file storage into Microsoft SharePoint. It gives us lots of ability to control access and determine who can see what. At its next level, it's a tool that we can use to create beautifully crafted intranet sites and communication platforms. And again, we run separate webinars on that. The next logo along is OneDrive. OneDrive is personal storage, and I always liken personal storage, those of you that have been working for as long as some of us have, it's what we would have used to have called the home drive. Or even maybe the My Briefcase for people that have really been working for a while. So it's personal storage in the cloud, accessible across all of those devices. But I guess much more than personal storage used to be, it's also a great collaboration platform. So as an individual, I use OneDrive a lot, and I can share individual files or folders with people that I work with inside and outside my organization. What we tend to view is OneDrive as being, though, that sort of personal document storage where the individual controls who they want to share what with, whereas SharePoint is much more the corporate file server replacement, where we put corporate rules in around who can see what and who can access what. The next logo with the E is Exchange. It's the bit that sits behind Outlook, effectively. So it's it's what used to be an Exchange server in our server cabinets, and it's largely invisible as far as most end users are concerned, but it's the thing that runs the back end of all of that sharing and collaboration that we can do within the Microsoft platform. The final logo, 10 points if you manage to work out what that one is. It's definitely the new kid on the block. It's Loop, a collaboration tool. It's designed to provide a canvas for real-time collaboration on emails, tasks, and documents all in one place. It's quite new, and I think we'll look to run a separate webinar over the next couple of months just to look at Loop. There's a few of us playing with it right now. And finally, just to point out some of the useful tool platform packages before we move into looking at security and control. A little bit hidden. Some of these you have to go into the Microsoft 365 portal to find, but some really powerful applications available to you within your 365 platform. There's loads more than this. If you ever click on the portal, you'll see loads of icons, but I just picked out some sort of personal favorites. Forms I love. It's a brilliant tool for creating surveys and questionnaires and gathering data from multiple people, both in or outside of your organization. It's kind of Microsoft's answer to SurveyMonkey. Microsoft Planner is a sort of a cut down project tool, project management tool. We use it really extensively internally here. Again, really good if you've got groups of people together working on tasks. We use it for our business plan, for example, don't we? So plans can be created, individual tasks made, assigned to individuals within a group, time, deadlines stamped, etc., etc. Again, more information on our website around that as well. Microsoft Viva integrates with Teams and provides well-being insights to your users, helping them to manage their workload, create focus time, and even offers you some daily breathing and meditation tools. Stream for SharePoint is a way of collating and sharing video content. I kind of always think of it as like an in-house locked down YouTube channel. And Microsoft To Do is a really clever task tool, which again integrates with tasks from different places, including Planner, for example, and Teams, and allows you to have a task list all in one place. And it's quite clever. You can create to-do lists for different projects. You can have some that are shared. You can have tasks assigned just for today. It's a really neat tool. And if you're somebody like me, that if I don't write it down, it doesn't get done, then it's definitely a bit of a right-hand tool for me. So that is a whistle-stop tour. I've given you loads and loads of information, and I'm going to stop talking and let James talk in just a minute. But a whistle-stop tour of the sort of the front-end applications that you get within 365. And as I say, we've got little videos. If you go onto the blog on ramsac.com, you can search for any of those products, and there are videos that explain them in more detail. And if there are things that are of particular interest to you, do drop a note to us in the feedback after the call, because we can run webinars on any of these tools in particular. But I want to come back to that first slide where we discussed the IT challenge. So far, I've given you an overview of what your end users get in 365, and appreciate that for some of you, most of you probably, that was a refresh of things that you already know. But we talked earlier about the security and governance challenges facing you as business leaders. I just told you about 14 applications, and there are loads more. 14 applications where your staff could be accessing and storing data concerning your organization. And they can potentially be accessing all 14 of those applications on their work laptop, their home PC, their tablet, and their smartphone. That's suddenly 56 different locations where you need to secure data. And remember, this data is no longer neatly hidden in a locked server room hidden behind a corporate firewall. This is on the train or in a branch of Starbucks. And given that you probably don't have the budget to give all of your staff company-owned devices, most organizations that we work with do not issue phones and tablets as well as laptops. There's a very high probability that your people are using personal tech as well as the tech that you think you're in control of in order to be accessing these sort of 56 different data points. And there's lots of advantages of that, but we need to make sure it's done safely. So how do we keep all of that safe? How do we control who accesses what? And how do we revoke access when somebody leaves or a user goes rogue? And how do we control a device that we might not own because it's an end user's own mobile phone? So this is where the Microsoft Security Suite, especially sort of Microsoft Intune, comes into play. It's not really a product, it's a suite of tools. And it's a suite of tools that allow us to address the various challenges that we've already started to discuss. And the important thing is you're already paying for this. This is already within your £18 per user per month business premium license. So if you're using other third-party applications and subscriptions and paying for those, you are potentially wasting budget because you're potentially using, sort of two different products that are doing the same job. And just before we go on, I just nip back to those sort of previous applications as well. And I'm always very clear, although we are Microsoft House, we're not so limited in our thinking that Microsoft tools are the only way that you can do all of those features that I've just talked about. But for us, the advantage of encouraging people to use the Microsoft 365 tools is everything sits within the same data tenant. So everything we're talking about today can, if your team are properly using all of those applications, everything we're about to talk about in terms of how we secure the cloud means that we're securing one tenant, one user identity, one password, and one place to lock down when somebody leaves the organization. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to let these guys do a bit more of the talking. But we're going to look step by step at literally a stepwise approach of how we can deploy the various elements of Microsoft security to make your 365 tenant the securest it can possibly be. So, Matt, we're going to start. This might feel old hat for some people, but we actually know from experience in winning new clients that not everybody is doing this, surprisingly. And surprisingly, we still get pushback from people that say, no, I don't want my people to have to use their mobile phone to do this. But multi-factor authentication.
Yes.
Tell me what I need to know about multi-factor authentication.
So we come to this first because it really is step one in the security journey that we're going to talk about, and it is crucially important in this cloud-based world that you've described, with people accessing company data from multiple places, multiple locations. In terms of what it is, it's obviously been around for quite a while. People's first experiences were probably internet banking.
Yeah.
You might have a little calculator to generate a code, but essentially it means having more than one form of authentication. So that first level of authentication is your username and password. And that is simply not enough anymore. It's far too easy for that to be guessed, passwords to be stolen or compromised in some way that means that somebody can then gain access to your 365 environment. And why is that so important? Well, if they can get in behind the scenes, and we see this as probably the most common form of compromise in the support desk, they can put rules in place to filter your email off, or even stop you receiving some of it. They can send invoices out in your name, tell your clients that you've changed bank details, all of these bad things that could happen. So data loss, financial loss, reputational loss. And the quickest and most effective way to stop most of those breaches is by implementing MFA. Microsoft actually say, I think they've changed it. It used to be 99.9% of breaches are stopped by MFA. I think it might be 99.5 now. It's still a lot. So do this first. If you haven't done this across the whole organization, please do it. And the reason it's multi-factor authentication, first level, as I said, is your username and password. You then layer on another form of authentication, something that you have, and that would usually these days be an authenticator app on your phone that generates a number. So you need to know your password, and then you need to have that code that changes every 30 seconds. And then if you're layering that up with a phone that requires facial recognition or fingerprint identification to unlock, that's your multiple layers before you can access the company data.
Brilliant. And we see all the time, don't we, phishing emails that are aimed purely at getting password information. So that's why Microsoft say that this is so much better. And we do see, we do have people that argue that it's a faff. And I think our standard advice, is, I mean, there is no way I would accept my bank sending me a CashPoint card without a PIN code on it, and that's multi-factor authentication, isn't it? I need to know my PIN code and my CashPoint card, and there is no way I would accept logging into my internet banking using my email address, which is widely in the public domain, and password 123 as a password. Like, you just wouldn't accept it.
Absolutely. It's also not as annoying as some people assume before they've actually put it in place. You are not prompted every single time you log on. You are not prompted every single time you access an email. In actual fact, it's generally if you access from a new device, or maybe if you're from a new location, that's when it will ask you to re-authenticate. So actually, if it's set up properly in the right way, it's quite unobtrusive.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you. So stage one of securing the cloud, MFA, it's kind of a given. And it's worth saying as well that increasingly we see, if you've got cyber insurance as part of your organization, check the terms, but the majority of cyber insurance companies now, your claim is invalidated if you haven't got MFA turned on. It's as simple as you haven't got a lock on the front door.
And not just on admin accounts, which used to be a given years and years ago. It has to be across the board.
Across every account. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so let's assume that everyone on this call has got MFA already turned on. That's brilliant. That's a good step. Now let's talk about devices. So the next stage, and I'm going to look at you for this, James, the next stage that we're talking about is mobile device management. And I know when we say that, everyone thinks mobile phones, but we don't just mean mobile phones, do we?
We don't. Mobile phones is included, so we can do things like Android, we can do iOS, but actually what we're primarily talking about is we're talking about laptops here.
Because they are mobile devices.
Exactly.
They're portable, yeah.
Exactly.
So what is MDM?
So MDM stands for Mobile Device Management. And in essence, it's a toolkit that allows us to manage and secure and enforce policies on devices. So this is typically company-owned devices. So this would be, in Ramsac's case, this is my laptop here. This belongs to Ramsac. This is enrolled into Microsoft Intune. And what that means is, from a security perspective, Ramsac can push security updates to my device. We can push new security configurations. And most importantly, if I were to lose this or it got stolen, we've got the capability to remotely wipe it as well. So where we're living in this world, that we're working in the office, at home, on the road, in so many different locations, we've just got that complete visibility and management over devices. So this is really around, this it does on Windows, this will do it on Macs, and this will do Android and iOS as well. But we're talking about company-owned devices here.
And why are we talking about company-owned devices? Because we're going to go on to talk about phones that aren't owned, but it's probably worth saying this is about what we can legitimately take control over, isn't it?
I think our stance on it is exactly that. This, as a company-owned device, we should have full control over that device. We should be able to set the security criteria that we want, and that's typically going to be a lot stricter than a personal device. We also want that management. We want to be able to actually wipe that device. We want to enforce encryption onto these devices, and we want to be able to manage that as well. So I think we need to be a bit stricter on these devices, because typically these are going to hold a lot of company data on them as well.
And I guess ultimately we have the right to, right? So whether this is your company laptop or whether I've given you a ramsac phone, there is a sense of company ownership. So therefore I have the right to say, I'm going to wipe this phone because you've left it on the train, or not that you would do that, James. Okay, so but the reality is, and I know I was out with two sort of contacts from a business networking group that I'm a part of for a walk a little while ago, and one of them said, well, we get over security by just giving everybody a company-owned device, and therefore we can have full control over it. But he'd got 80 staff, and an iPhone times 80 with a monthly subscription, that's really expensive, and most organisations don't have that luxury. The other chap that I was walking with said, we just don't allow people to access anything on their phones. But actually that in itself is annoying. Like, I want to be able to do some emails while I'm sat on the train while we're commuting into Waterloo to see a client. So the reality is, for the majority of clients we work with, there is an element of personal device use in play, and particularly around mobile phones typically, right? So that moves us on to mobile application management. So James, again, tell me, what is mobile application management?
So if we think of mobile device management, we've just spoken about taking control over the entire device. Mobile application management is a solution that allows us to put some controls in place over the applications that are used to access company data. So a really good example of this one is going to be personal mobile devices, so people's personal phones. And typically it's going to be people are going to be accessing their email on their phones. That's a really common one. Although, as you've just said, Dan, we've got SharePoint, we've got Teams, we've got all these other apps you can download from the App Store and have on your personal phone. So the challenge here is, well, how do we make sure that's secure? And how do we make sure that we've got some control over that data? And this is where mobile application management addresses that challenge. What we can do is we can set up some policies, and what effectively we do by that is we almost sandbox the company data. So what we do is we say, actually, if you want to access your company email on your phone, you have to use the Outlook app. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply some controls to that Outlook app. So maybe we're going to insist that you have a PIN code or a facial recognition to actually open that app. Maybe we're going to put some controls in that say, actually, you can't copy and paste any of that data into other third-party apps. So if people use things like Dropbox on their personal account, we just want to stay all in that particular bubble. And I think this is really important because it means that employees have got that flexibility if they want to use their own devices. But from an IT perspective, we've got that peace of mind that all that data is secure. And if then somebody, actually, if they were to leave the organisation or if they were to lose their phone, what we can do as IT is we can just wipe just that container with the work information in there and leave all that personal information alone. So it's quite a nice balance between the two.
So effectively what you're saying then is, I can use my own phone. I still own all the data on my phone. You don't have any rights over the pictures of my dog, or the funny cat videos that I've just downloaded on Facebook. You don't see that. You can't control that. But if I want to use my phone for accessing Teams or accessing Outlook, that sits within an app, and you determine that I'm allowed access to that data within that app, and you can delete just that data without impacting on my cat videos.
Exactly. And then we can define what security criteria you have to meet before you get access. So actually, maybe we want to say, well, you can access your company email on your personal phone, but actually you've got to be running the latest version of iOS or Android before you can do that. So actually, this is really handy when we look at things like different security frameworks, like the ramsac cyber resilience assessment, or if there's anyone looking at cyber essentials, where you suddenly have to meet these certain levels of criteria. This is a really good way of enforcing those controls.
Excellent. So MDM, mobile device management, is securing the device that we own. Mobile application management is securing data on devices that we don't own.
Correct.
And this is all included within the license fee that we're already paying for.
All part of it already. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Keep that balance between productivity and security.
And that's really important, isn't it? We want to make life secure.
Yeah.
But we also want people to be able to work in the way that they choose to work.
Yeah.
Excellent. So just move the slide on. Conditional access. This sounds a little bit more complicated, James. What are we talking about with conditional access, which we see as sort of stage 3 of our security journey, don't we?
Exactly. So conditional access is another set of rules that we can apply on top of what we've just spoken about to put some more security in place. So I think back to when Microsoft 365 first came out, one of the big sort of marketing messages was, it's great because you can access your data anywhere around the world on any device that you want. And then a lot of organizations started thinking, and IT started thinking, well, actually, what if I don't want everyone to access it on any device anywhere in the world? What if I just want it to be on my work device and I only want that people to access that from the UK, for example? This is where conditional access comes in. I kind of think of it as more these sort of if-then statements that you've set up. So an example would be, if I want to access my data in 365, I have to use MFA. For example, that would be a really simple one that we've just spoken about. Another example could be, if I want to access 365, then I have to be coming from the UK to do that. So that's, again, a really good example that you can start filtering it down by location, or you could start blocking risky countries that just don't need access to 365. So you could start doing that. And then sort of moving all the way down the line, if you wanted to, you could then start saying, well, actually, I only want people coming in from company devices. I don't want any personal devices to access my data. So you can start by working on this. You can then really start layering additional controls in to actually be a bit more targeted how you want to do that. And it's a really flexible solution that you can do.
And am I right in saying as well that we can target this via groups of employees? So it doesn't have to be universal across the whole organisation. So, for example, I know we work with a sort of a care-centric organisation where they've got sort of a mobile workforce accessing quite sensitive data. They need to be able to access that data wherever they are, because they might be in a patient's home or a hospital setting. So we can allow that group of, in this case, clinicians, to have access from the device that we've given them to this data. But the general admin staff working away from the office under GDPR, have no right to access. So we can stop that group of users from being able to access data from anywhere but in the office, more specifically than just the UK, kind of within a postcode. Is that right?
Absolutely. We can lock it down to the office if we wanted to. So it's really flexible what you can actually do here.
So again, you could have groups of staff that would never need to work abroad. And groups that do lots of international travel. So we can allow this group of executives to work in anywhere in the world, but maybe restrict Russia, for example. And then we can say, well, this group of individuals never travel for work, so they should never need access outside of the UK.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay. And then sort of the next stage, then we're really sort of ramping up and I think it's worth saying we're doing all of this kind of in a very deliberate, logical order, aren't we? We start there's no point coming straight into conditional access if we've not allowed enabled the basics of multi-factor authentication. So the next stage of our journey then is DLP. What is DLP? What does that stand for, James? What does that give us?
It stands for data loss prevention. So this is a suite of tools that you can use to effectively prevent data from leaking outside the organisation, and that could be accidentally, that could be maliciously, but this is more around data governance and how you can control that data. That's in some of those applications we've just spoken about. So SharePoint and Teams is a really good example.
So this isn't about controlling devices. This is about controlling sets of data itself.
This is controlling data. This is going above and beyond what you would typically find in SharePoint, your regular permission structures. These are things that when you design SharePoint, these are a given. You might have a finance site and that's just locking down just the finance team to access it. This goes on to the next stage on this one. So to give a couple of examples, what you could do, a very common example that you could use some of Microsoft templates is if you're dealing with personal information, perhaps that might be NHS number, it could be passport number, and actually you want to keep all that information contained. You could set up some rules in 365 which scan for that information, and perhaps you might want to decide, I never want that to be sent via email. So you can set some rules up to do that as well. That's around sort of sensitive information, but then you can go a step further and you can look at something called sensitivity labels, which come as part of this as well. Now, these are really powerful, and what this is around is data classification and data governance as well. So we talked about traditional permission structures you might get in SharePoint, and an example, let's just roll with the finance example. We've got, let's say, some payroll information sat in that finance site, and that document's nice and secure because it's locked in, it's in that finance site, we've got MFA enabled, and we're pretty comfortable. What happens if that document is accidentally moved to another SharePoint site? Well, suddenly it then becomes readily available to everyone. What you can do and how you can use sensitivity labels is you can apply a label to a document, which then specifies some additional security controls. Perhaps that's, you might want to encrypt that document. Perhaps you just want certain people in the organization to see that document. But the real poignant point here is that the label travels with that document. So even if that's moved within SharePoint, or perhaps that's downloaded to someone's computer, or it's ended up on a USB drive, if you've got a label that says only 3 of us should access that document, and it ends up on someone else's computer, they won't be able to access that at all.
And what I really love about this, the example that kind of blew my mind a little bit, is that this lives on completely outside of the organization and completely outside of that user's permissions, doesn't it? So, let's just say we've got a sensitive Excel spreadsheet that only the 3 of us are allowed to see. And as you say, James, you've loaded it onto a USB key, or you've emailed it to your Gmail account, and then you leave ramsac. Once we've disabled, not that you're allowed to, but you leave ramsac. Once we've disabled your 365 account, it doesn't matter that you've got your own local copy of that spreadsheet on your Gmail. You still can't open it once you've left. Is that right? Because
the label is tied to that document, if I try and open it, it's going to prompt me to log in, which of course my account's been disabled, and therefore I've then lost access to that.
And I think this is brilliant. It's, for all the years I've worked in IT, it's often been recruitment consultants actually that have come to us with this challenge, isn't it? How do I stop my people downloading this spreadsheet of data, taking it to their next employer? And this is how we do it, right?
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you. So, James, we don't have much time to talk about Copilot today, and Copilot for 365, of course, isn't part of the Business Premium license.
Been available as an add-on for.
Indeed. And we've got lots of events and webinars around Copilot, so we're not going to go into what it is. But one of the things, anyone that's on the call that has been on one of our Copilot for 365 webinars will have heard us talk about data management and data controls ahead of rolling out a tool that effectively gives people access to all of the data via a Copilot ChatGPT type tool. Presumably then, a lot of what we've just talked about, these pillars of data access, and that's all part of Copilot readiness, isn't it?
Absolutely. Everything we've talked about are the steps that we're recommending all organisations take in that journey to be prepared for Copilot. And certainly sensitivity labels is going to play a big part in that process as well. In simple terms, Copilot will be able to search and report on that information that you've got permission to. So I think it's really important that before we go down the Copilot, we really look at data governance. We make sure that we've got the right permissions. If we've got super sensitive data, we've got labels applied to that. So we've got 2 sets of control on that. So everything we've spoken about today really just feeds into that readiness for Copilot.
Excellent. So really important to be doing anyway, because people are working in lots of locations on lots of devices. But given that if we're not already looking at Copilot GPT type tools, we're going to be at some point in the future. This is all good preparatory work for that anyway.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. One of the other features that I just wanted to cover on the sort of this whole security journey, because it is included in your 365 Business Premium license, is Defender for Business. So Defender for Business is a bundle of antivirus, anti-malware security tools. I'm oversimplifying it, and you'll probably kick me under the table for this as a proper techie. But Defender is essentially anti-malware. It is essentially your endpoint protection and sort of detection tool, isn't it? So potentially, this means that you could replace your current third-party antivirus subscription and just use Defender, which you're already paying for as part of 365. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think that's a very real option nowadays. I think we're so used to paying a separate subscription for antivirus. Defender has improved massively, and Microsoft are putting a huge amount of investment into Defender, and we've seen it improve just hugely in the last 12 months. So I think it's a real conversation piece now that when we're speaking to our clients and we're saying, okay, we've used a third-party antivirus solution. Actually, we've got business premium. Can we squeeze a bit more value out of that license and then change it to Defender and actually have a really good, reliable antivirus solution as well? So I think it's definitely a conversation we're having more.
As interesting as it is, we ran a version of this webinar about 6 months ago, and on this slide, we were very much saying the jury is out. We're not actively recommending it yet, whereas we've definitely transitioned our own opinion, I think, over the last 6 months. It's worth saying that it isn't a universally held opinion, though, isn't it? I think there are still some techie people that would say, I don't want all of my security eggs in one basket. I don't want everything sat with Microsoft. And that good security practice is multi-layered. You don't just put a lock on your door at home. You also fit bolts and a deadlock, and you set an alarm, and you make sure your windows are closed. And in the IT terms, there is an argument that says, well, you could turn on Defender and still use your Sophos antivirus subscription and have a real multi-layered approach. And I think that would be considered the very best practice. I suppose everybody has a budget restriction, and with security in particular, you've got to decide where your money is best spent. And I think our experience over the last 6 months has definitely changed as well, in that as we keep up the fight with cyber criminals, which is an ever-evolving challenge for all of us in the industry, we are seeing things being bypassed. So, I think probably a year ago, we would have said, well, MFA is going to stop 99% of attacks. Actually, we know that there's some real sort of clever cyber attacks, which are almost prompting people who are a little bit fatigued with security to just accept the MFA request on their phones. And we've seen a couple of breaches in the last week or two, haven't we, where people have just kind of had that fatigue. And really,
almost falling for a phishing campaign, and your MFA session has been stolen, essentially.
Indeed. So we are, it's always about trying to catch up with the criminals at every stage, isn't it? And I think, the best practice advice is that what organizations really need now is not just these tools sat in the background. You actually need active monitoring. You actually need IT security professionals 24/7 monitoring suspicious activity, and not just looking at people logging, actually looking at behaviors and actually looking at what is indicating something outside of the norm and being able to respond to that
when something gets through.
And sort of a shameless plug, but I'm going to make it anyway, that's the ramsac Secure Plus service. So the Secure Plus service that we layer on is about actual humans and machines looking at behaviors. So the tech can protect 90% probably of the risk, but then we also need to be looking at behaviors. And then when that fire alarm sounds, actually having people that can respond and know what to do. And the reason I mention that on this slide is, I suppose best practice might be deploy Defender because you've got it, and have Sophos antivirus as well. But if you don't have, and have Secure Plus, but if you don't have the budget for everything, perhaps these days it's Sophos that we would say to drop, and use Defender as your sort of endpoint device management, and then Secure Plus being the sort of the best in class. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. So,
yeah.
Just very quickly, just to mention that everything we talked about today, whilst we're talking about Microsoft, it's all cross-platform, isn't it? So Windows, Linux, Mac, Android, mobile devices, physical devices, virtual desktops. everything that we're talking about here in terms of that Microsoft house, that can be deployed across all technologies.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So I guess what we've looked at over the last 45 minutes is that the features, the products that you're possibly, what you're paying for Microsoft within that 365 license, what you're already paying for, there's a whole load of features that you probably don't even know that you've got. And, you know, we Microsoft talk about 365 as do more for less. And when you look at the Microsoft presentations of do more for less, I think they're actually quite hard to sort of untangle. But what we've tried to do in a fairly simple way today is saying, look, you're paying for a business premium license. You've got all of these tools in your toolkit and they just need to be configured. And whether that's, you know, on the screen, I've got those kind of end user applications. There's a huge amount. I mean, IT was not this secure when we had it all in our server rooms, was it? We didn't have all of these tools and all of this ability. But I guess this is keeping up with that demand of IT doesn't happen behind a firewall anymore, does it?
Yeah, exactly.
IT happens in the spare room at home, you know, where you've set up your home office and, or as I say, in the coffee shop. And, you know, again, home working isn't new. That happened pre-pandemic, but it used to, again, probably be secured via, I guess, a VPN and again through the firewall. But people don't have firewalls anymore, really, do they? So, or not in the same way that they did before. So just to summarise, I think we present this as a sort of a staged process from least secure to most secure. And what we've talked through today, through multi-factor authentication, through then managing the devices that you own, managing the data that sits on the devices that you don't own, and then through both conditional access and data loss prevention, really putting in detailed, quite granular rules about who can do what. And then in best practice, then turning on the sort of the secure plus type monitoring and detection and response services. That it builds a journey from least secure to most secure. And the most secure organizations that we work with are kind of doing all of these things. And I always liken cyber protection to the protection you deploy for your physical premises, for your office, or for your own home for that matter. There is no point putting brilliant locks on the front door if that door is left open at night. There is no point having automatic closers if the windows aren't locked. There's no point having CCTV if nobody is checking it and making sure it's all switched on and working and monitoring it. And I think in the same way, what we've tried to demonstrate today is that modern cybersecurity demands multiple layers of protection. Intune or the associated products isn't the only thing we need to think about. We also need to be thinking about, you know, sort of monitoring, end user training and awareness, testing, phishing campaigns, penetration testing, all of that kind of thing. And we can talk about that. We've got webinars planned for a lot of those subjects. But hopefully what we've demonstrated today is you don't have to be spending a fortune. You don't have to be buying lots and lots of third-party applications to have real state-of-the-art security. You can be doing that within what you've already got. So data in the cloud, hugely beneficial. Mobile working, you know, none of us want to go back to that sort of 5 days a week in the office, work only happening in a certain place. But we've got to, organizations have really got to plot where they are. And, you know, the slide up now kind of showing from MFA through to DLP and kind of underpinned by monitoring is really something we're helping a lot of clients actively with, to sort of plot where they are and the steps involved. Because I think with all of these things, it's worth saying you can just turn them on, but it goes disastrously wrong typically, doesn't it?
Things can break.
Yeah.
People can't work suddenly, or systems don't work properly. It needs some consideration.
So it just needs a little bit of thought, a little bit of planning, but it doesn't need expensive third-party subscriptions.
Sure,
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you. That's the sort of the topic that we said we would cover. We're bang on time. We said we'd try and finish at 10 to 3, and it is spot on 10 to 3. So well done, gentlemen. Almost like we planned it. More than happy to take any questions that come in on the chat, or to answer those afterwards. If you're on the call and you're an existing ramsac client, then your ramsac relationship manager or your solutions architect are very happy to talk to you about where you are on that Microsoft journey, and to help you sort of go through we've got some very defined project processes for how we enable all of these things. If you're not a ramsac customer and you've got specific questions, again, more than happy for you to send in any questions that you might have. Anything we need to answer immediately, or has Titania been answering those offline for us?
Yes, I haven't seen anything coming through yet. Let's have a look. So I think they've probably been dealt with as we've been going through.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time today. We will make a copy of these slides available with a recording of the presentation after the call. You will receive a very short, a quick question about Purview has just come in. I'm going to put you on the spot here, James. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Purview?
So Purview is a set of solutions that really allow you to manage and govern your data. So what we talked around, things like DLP, and we talked around sensitivity labels, that's an example of something you can find in the Compliance Admin Centre, which is part of Purview. You can also use Purview to find and discover sensitive data that you might have stored in the cloud as well. So that could be personal information, it could be financial information, but what it can do is go through and it can show in the locations, in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, where that's stored. So it sort of has a bit of a starting point to help you discover where that information is. So this is quite a good strategy for people looking at Copilot as well. So I think it's the discovery piece, and then you can start to actually put in some technical controls like we talked about today to actually start securing that data as well. So very whistle stop, but that's a bit of a high leveler on.
It's actually it's a new name for existing tools, isn't it? Essentially, James, because it's been around for a while as these audit and compliance tools under different names, and Purview is the banner. Microsoft loves new names for stuff.
Exactly.
Really like Defender has 157 products within it, or whatever it is, but Purview is kind of similar. It was a load of other products that are now labelled as Purview.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So not a defence tool, but a kind of an audit and readiness, a discovery tool that will probably lead to you then wanting to implement a lot of these kind of core pillars of security anyway.
It will be security, and then it can also focus on data retention and life cycle as well. So perhaps you've got documents that you want to have a policy in place to help clear them out once they've reached a certain age in your SharePoint as well. So it can do that sort of security piece, and it can do that data lifecycle piece as well.
So data lifecycle being, if your data retention policy, for example, says that you will keep financial records for 7 years, you don't then have to remember to do. I remember when that meant sending somebody out to the filing room for a couple of days to shred paper, but it's the equivalent of just automating the deletion of data.
Exactly, if you want to do
Excellent.
that, yeah.
Thank you, James. Anything else, Matt?
Nothing else at the moment. I will obviously pick up on anything that comes in afterwards.
Yeah, we will. The chat will stay open, so feel free to answer any questions. Send in any questions. As I say, you'll receive a brief survey after the call, and it's massively helpful for us if you can give us some feedback. But for now, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, James. Thank you, Matt. And have a very good afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.